Well, good evening. Anybody here from the whole conference? Oh, good. Good to see you again. Doesn't seem that long ago. We're glad that you could join us, though, and because you'll be in store for a treat. How many of you have heard Dr. Youngberg before? Okay, almost an equal number. So, all right. Well, Dr. Youngberg is going to start off tonight with obviously a current topic. If you mentioned coronavirus, he didn't mention COVID-19, but that's the that's the going term now. So, but really is going to be emphasizing health in that regard and in that context. But it's a very current things are happening to help us focus on our general immunity and health. So as we begin, let's bow our heads for prayer. Father in heaven, we invite you to be present with us as you have promised, as we are gathered together in your house, and we ask you to bless us, to give us understanding and wisdom. We ask you to be with Dr. Youngberg as he presents to us principles of health that can greatly aid us in our immunity and in resistance to disease and illness. And we thank you for gifting him with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and the gift to share this knowledge with us. So we pray that you will give us ears to hear and minds to understand, and attitudes and fortitude to do the things that we need to do in our own individual lives as we see these principles illuminated, that we may come in harmony with your laws of health, and that we may enjoy the benefits of that. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So I want to, if those of you who have not heard Dr. Youngberg or met him, he will be with us this weekend, tonight, tomorrow at our 10:45 service, and then also after our potluck dinner that we have for lunch, I should say, not dinner, for lunch, a healthy lunch. Then he will do his last presentation at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So just stay by with us as you are with us this weekend. And well, Dr. Youngberg has been here a number of times. We enjoy having him because he helps people understand things in regards to health. And he always is a wealth of information, stays current. He's practically the principal developer of the program that we run here, the Diabetes Undone program, which we will be holding on March 8 for 8 consecutive weeks. And he's an author. He's written at least a couple of books, Goodbye Diabetes and Hello Healthy. He's in practice in lifestyle medicine and teaches at the Loma Linda University School. So he's busy, needless to say. So we're lucky to be able to tear him away from this busy schedule and have him come all the way up here from Temecula to be with us this weekend. So, Wes, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Very much. Well, thank you, Dr. Lowe. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening and actually this whole weekend. Yeah, I think this is like our 4th or 5th time we've done this. And one of the challenges, of course, is to make sure that this is new information. I promise you this week, and this is new information, as we begin our discussion this weekend, how do we optimize our immune system? If there was ever a time now where we want to take advantage of the principles that are outlined in the Diabetes Undone program that this organization is going to start doing once a week or in early March for 8 weeks, it's now. I'm going to briefly do an introduction on this COVID-19, this new novel coronavirus, and the implications of not just how it's going to affect China and Europe and Asia, but how it's going to affect you and I right here in the United States, right here in California. So dismiss any notion that it's not going to affect you and your family. Because if you're listening to the experts that have been being interviewed for the last 3 to 4 weeks. They have been telling us, even though we don't want to hear it, that it's coming, and it's coming with a vengeance. And it's basically like a tidal wave that's coming our way, and that there's government officials are frequently saying we may be able to contain it still, but that's not likely. All the experts, Los Alamos National Laboratory, the mathematic modelers, they're all saying no, this is going to be big, and we need to basically pay attention. And so the problem is that very little information has been given that gives us a call to action. There is, tomorrow morning, I'm going to be talking about the difference between passive stress and active stress as we go about getting ready for something that is known to be headed our way. It's actually already at our door. We just don't know it. We don't see it. We don't feel it. We don't experience it because there's such a long asymptomatic period from the time of exposure to the time of infection to the time of symptoms. And so this is why, one of the big reasons why coronavirus disease 19 and the SARS coronavirus 2, the actual virus that causes the disease, is such a serious threat to our health in our nation. And so I want to look at this as a positive opportunity of what you and I can do right now. So that's why I titled this talk is not only optimizing our immune system, but doing it within the context of natural strategies and simple remedies that we can use to prevent, but also to treat this novel coronavirus, but also other viral and other respiratory infections. This isn't the beauty of natural and simple remedies is that they don't just work for one thing. They work for every aspect of health. They mobilize our immune system, our defenses. They mobilize our ability to get well, to stay well, and to heal from these very serious diseases. So let's just jump right into it. I gave a presentation now, I guess 3 weeks ago, at my home church, and so you see here, this is a 3-week-old graphic that shows how the virus had spread over the previous 10 days, January 20 to January 30. Basically, 1 month ago, China had 291 cases. You just think about that for a little bit. We're approaching 80,000 or more cases in China right now, a month later. Okay, so that's just a huge exponential rise, and that is in a nation that basically locked down nearly 1 billion individuals. I don't think that's going to happen anywhere else around the world. I don't think so. And so if they couldn't contain it, what do you think the chances are of any other nation on earth containing it? And so that's why we have to start looking at viable strategies to protect ourselves and our family members. So let's go right to the top medical journals. The Lancet, which is arguably one of the top 5 medical journals in the world, published a study by several professors at the University of Hong Kong Medical School, and this was published January 31. So this warning was given to us 3 weeks ago. Okay, so we're basically 3 weeks post this this documentation. This is one of the main centers around the world that is the World Health Organization Collaborating Center for Infectious Disease Epidemiology and Control, and they have their own School of Public Health there. Now, so Dr. Gabriel Leung and his wife, also a doctor at the center, and several other collaborators, basically said this, and this is part of the abstract. This wasn't hidden in the discussion section of the article, of the paper. This was in the top abstract that said, unless substantial public health interventions at both the population and personal levels, okay, and we'll come back to personal levels, are implemented immediately 3 weeks ago, okay, independent, self-sustaining outbreaks in major cities globally could become inevitable because of substantial exportation of pre-symptomatic cases. That's the reality. Nobody but really China has been really applying this theory or this notion aggressively, and that's why this is just spreading everywhere. And so now we have Japan, which is exponentially spreading right now, just in the last few days and the last week. We have South Korea, dramatic spreading going on there, and really the public health measures that have been implemented through the governments have not worked. None of them have worked properly, and so there's going to be a lot of hindsight, a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking going on, but basically the public health approach is not working right now. It's really up to us as individuals to pay attention to this and make sure we have options available to us. Which, once again, if there was ever a time for us to start paying attention to our personal health, our family, our immediate families and our extended families' personal health, it's now. This is going to be the theme of this weekend as we discuss this, because it has a huge impact on whether we get infected, and if we get infected, which some projections suggest up to 50% of us will become infected, okay? In other words, it's much more infective than the common seasonal flu, okay? And that, what have been the public health successes in containing the seasonal flu? Even in the best of years with vaccines, it has been a disaster, right? Because 3,000 to 61,000 people die every year in the United States alone because of complications of the regular seasonal flu. And we're talking about something that's far, far more virulent and deadly than the seasonal flu. I'll show you and prove that to you in a minute. Because there's this notion going around on the media, and I've heard it on TV personally many times, where they say the seasonal flu is far, far worse of a problem than COVID-19. That is somebody that is being completely, I was going to say irrational, but maybe that's not the right word. It's completely misinformation. It's just not true at all. Nobody with a rational evaluation of the data could actually say that. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So he goes on to say, this is the University of Hong Kong and the WHO Center saying preparedness plans and mitigation intervention should be readied for quick deployment globally. So let's just go through this quickly because I want to get to the nitty-gritty. What do we do about this? Los Alamos National Laboratory, one of the most respected high-level laboratories in the world, right here in our backyard in California, their section on infectious disease outbreak modeling, where they have mathematicians that have developed models that are so precise that are able to factor in so many of the considerations that influence epidemics, they have been able to very accurately predict and project what's going to happen based on an understanding of other outbreaks. They're actually projecting, and this is specifically for the city of Wuhan. Okay? They're projecting between 550,000 cases to 4.4 million. Now, there were some actual reports in the media that were calling these deaths, but I'm going to stick with cases for right now, okay? Because that's the more conservative evaluation of this. But even so, that is so much higher than what is being told to us by the Chinese government at this time. So just about everybody who actually understands public health epidemiology and has been looking at the data is saying this. Okay, and this is the number one laboratory. So let me actually show you why this is so important. The CDC just this past year determined that the best mathematical model for accurate forecasting of the 2018-2019 seasonal flu for timing, peak, and short-term intensity was from the model that was done at Los Alamos. Okay, so this is widely considered to be the number one modeling institution in the world for accurately projecting what is actually going to happen. Los Alamos also accurately projected the course of the 2003 SARS outbreak in the city of Toronto that had over 400 cases. So we keep hearing that SARS is more deadly, but very few cases develop. So there's already been, just in China alone, 5 times, well over 5 times more deaths than the entire SARS epidemic over a 2-year period caused. So we really got to take this seriously for our health. Well, here's a picture of this friendly little virus, and you see these little spikes on the outside of this virus. These are the protein spikes that actually attach to the ACE2 receptors in the alveolar membrane of the lungs. So the lungs basically branch down into little teeny bronchioles that have little sacs on them, and these sacs have receptors in them that this virus attaches to. That's why the symptoms of the COVID-19 are primarily lung-related symptoms, and shortness of breath is something that should really cause serious concern for anybody that starts experiencing it. Of course, there's many other potential causes of that, but once somebody has shortness of breath because they've had a cough, that maybe had a little bit of a fever or more significant fever, that is very serious, because that means that the disease is taking on a more serious classification, and that you need to get your oxygen levels back up, or else there's going to be serious complications and possible death. So these are, it's interesting, because I may forget this during my presentation. One of the things that researchers have discovered is that current or past smokers are much more susceptible to this virus. Now, you might think, well, that just goes without saying, doesn't it? Smokers are just less healthy in general. But it's not, in this case, it's not so much related to how healthy that smoker is, because you've all seen smokers that are actually healthier than you are, right? They're fitter, they're stronger, they may be hardier, okay? But when somebody smokes, what happens is that the alveoli start producing a much higher level of this receptor protein, ACE2, the angiotensin converting enzyme protein, and by producing more of that protein, now the virus has more proteins to stick to, and it becomes much more infectious. So just the act of smoking generates, quote, protective mechanisms in the body that enhances this protein receptor, and now you're a sitting duck because you're exposed to a virus that has more capacity to infiltrate the cells of the lungs and get into the body. Okay, so that's why one reason that there was a concern that Asian or Chinese men were more susceptible on a genetic basis, and now they've discovered that that is much more likely because 48% of Chinese males smoke, and it used to be a lot higher than that. So that's the real issue. It's the smoking issue is a big deal. Okay, here is Dr. Robert Redfield, the medical doctor and director of the Centers for Disease Control in the United States. I understand he's a virologist, and on February 12th, okay, so this is over a week ago now, he was interviewed by Stat News, and he said this: if the United States begins to see instances of several parts of the country in which single case ignites 4 generations of human-to-human infection, meaning a person who contracts the virus infects another person who then infects another person and then another, a 4th person, that's 4 generations of transmission, and that is apparently now, according to the CDC director, the determining factor on whether the CDC changes its policies from containment to now trying to mitigation, to trying to do something about it. I'll let you decide whether that's a good idea or not, but at any rate, that was a little bit concerning to me because we're waiting until essentially a month after this is already known to be present and documented as a case before it's considered to be a problem. So that almost ensures that spread will occur. Now, so Dr. Robert Redfield added that at some point in time, it is highly probable that we'll have to transition to mitigation as a public health strategy using social distancing measures. He also said social isolation measures. So, for example, stated closure of certain public facilities and other techniques to try to limit the number of people who become infected. Now that makes sense, right? And so but the goal is how do we limit that from ever happening? And if it does happen, what do we do about it? All right, so Professor Gabriel Leung also, who published the document in The Lancet 3 weeks ago, he also was quoted as saying, if not halted, the new coronavirus could infect 60% of the world's population and kill 1 in 100 that are infected, roughly 50 million people. Now, for those of you that have paid any attention to the Spanish flu epidemic or pandemic of 1918, we know that at minimum 50 million people died worldwide at a time when the world's population was about a quarter of what it is now. And other estimates suggest it was actually 100 million people who died from that. But the virulence or the infectivity of this current coronavirus is much higher than the Spanish flu, the Spanish influenza virus was. We got to understand this. Okay, so that's why we don't want to be complacent at such a time like this. Professor Mark Lipsitch from Harvard actually estimates 40 to 70% of the world's population could be infected. Now, let me just comment on this. This being infected isn't the bad part. Okay, it's almost like we should. There's one chance in 2 worldwide that we're going to be infected, but 80% of us who get infected may not even realize it, or will have such mild symptoms that it doesn't really cause a problem to our health. You know, we just kind of go about our day, you know, just a little bit slower than usual, not feeling great, but we're actually, it's not majorly disruptive to our lives. But here's the problem. Even those of us who actually get through it okay, which is 80% of us, we're infecting other people for up to 2 weeks or even longer, even before we have the first symptom, the first inkling that we might have a little bit of an illness. Okay, and the people that we infect, okay, could actually go on, many of them could go on to experience severe illness and potential death. So there's a huge issue here about transmissibility, even if we don't have a huge problem with it. So 80% of us will be fine. According to the current mathematical modeling, about 20% of people get severely ill, requiring some type of medical assistance, and maybe being admitted for a time to the general hospital floor. 5% of the total infected, or a quarter of that 20% that get so sick they need to end up into ICU. So do the numbers on that. Okay, so if we have 330 million individuals in the U.S. Okay, and let's just estimate that half of us could get infected, and it may be a lot less than that, but let's just do the numbers. That's 165 million individuals that get infected. 80%, fine, okay, but 20%, seriously, at 20% of 165 million, what's your first concern? Actually, the first concern isn't how many people die. First concern is people aren't going to be getting medical care, because there's no way that our medical system can take care of it. That's why it's going to be relegated to our home. Ultimately, what we do is really going to be the only thing that matters in the long run. Okay, so that's why we jump into that. All right, so the bottom line is that the case fatality rate for the seasonal flu is estimated right around 0.1%. There's been some reports as high as 0.2%, but some of them are much lower than 0.1%. The current low estimate for case fatality rate with COVID-19 is basically 2.2%. I've seen it 2.4 or higher. I've seen some estimates at 4%. Let's just say it's 2.2%. That's 23 times more fatal than the seasonal flu. Okay, so put aside any of these expectations that the flu is actually worse than COVID-19. It's not even close. Not even close. So if you take the numbers for the flu, how many people die from the flu? As few as 3,000 a year die from complications of the flu in the U.S. alone. Multiply that by 23, see what number you get. As high as 61,000 die in any given year because of complications of the flu. Multiply that number by 23 and see how big that number is. Okay, so that gives us an understanding of where we're at. Okay, I just took a screenshot from a TV, CNBC. I was just flipping channels, and I saw this, and this was a really good representation of the infectious rate, or what's called the R0 or R0, the basic reproduction number of this virus. How many people are infected by every person that has been previously infected? And so for the common seasonal flu, for every person that is infected, that person infects 1.28 or 1.3, 1 1/3 other people. And you know how infectious the flu is, right? Any given year, that a huge percent of the population comes down with the flu. Again, 80% kind of get through it within a couple days, no big deal. But then there's that percentage of people that have more problems with it. Okay, so the 1918 flu was a 1.8 R naught number. The R naught number right now, low estimate, is 2.2. So for if, let's say, I get infected with COVID-19, with the SARS coronavirus 2, the name of the virus itself, I get infected with that, I am, on average, going to infect 2.2 other people. And then they infect 2.2 other people, and that happens every 4 to 7 days for doubling effect. That's why it spreads so rapidly. But the actual R naught of this could be as high as 6.6. Of course, measles is really high. That's why measles was such a tough one. Okay, so who's at risk? Who's at most risk? It doesn't appear to be kids. Very, very few kids or babies who are exposed to this virus actually get sick. That's really good news, right? If I'm a father, if I'm a grandfather, I would much rather suffer and die than to see my little kids suffer and die, my grandkids, right? So that's a good thing. Okay, but the adults, young adults, middle-aged adults, older adults, we are much higher risk. But who is at most risk? People with underlying medical conditions. And if I were to pick one condition that is most commonly addressed when somebody says, who's at risk of this? It's diabetics. So that's why I'm so glad that Dr. Lowe and his medical team and his program team are regularly offering this Diabetes Undone program, which is a comprehensive lifestyle medicine program that helps people get healthy. It's not just about getting blood sugars under control. It's helping people get healthy so their immune system starts working the way it's able to work under the right scenarios. And so the Diabetes Undone program is designed to help people get healthy. It's a lifestyle medicine program. So even if you don't have diabetes, okay, remember, if you're over the age of 40, chances are you have at least prediabetes. At least 1 out of 2 people who are between the ages of 40 and 59 have at least prediabetes. If you're between the ages of 60 and 74, 2 out of every 3 of you, I should say of us, okay, have at least prediabetes. And if you're 75 years of age or older, 3 out of 4 of you already have at least prediabetes. And most of you have no idea that you have it because you haven't taken the time to get the appropriate testing, like the type of testing that Dr. Lowe and the team with Diabetes Undone do ahead of the program and do pre and post testing. So diabetics, top of the list, we have cardiovascular disease patients, we have COPD. Anything regarding the lungs, asthma, much higher risk of having a problem with COVID-19. And then, obviously, if you're immunocompromised, you're sitting duck for this. And so how do we maximize our immune system, even if we have those conditions? There is definitely hope. Let's jump into it. So it was Herbert Hoover, one of my favorite presidents. He had great quotations. He said, wisdom consists not so much in knowing what to do in the ultimate as in knowing what to do next. See, so many of us, we play the wait and see game. Well, that was really interesting, Doc. He said, but I'm just going to kind of sit back and kind of wait until I see it coming, until I know for sure, until I have a family member that dies of it. Okay, then I'll get serious about it. But right now, this is just a problem in China. Well, okay, Japan. Well, okay, South Korea. Oh, okay, Thailand. And we have no idea. Well, we do, but very few people are willing to consider the reality because it's just too terrible to consider what's actually happening right now all across Southeast Asia and India and you name it. Throughout the third world countries, it's going to be devastating. And so, what do we do now? Let's do something right now. Let's jump into it. So, obviously, we need to pay attention to the typical symptoms. And And as I mentioned earlier, the typical symptoms are not sneezing so much, even though that can be a symptom. It's mainly coughing. It's a fever. Coughing is the biggie one, and shortness of breath. Once you get shortness of breath, it's already progressed, and you're starting to get serious, and you're starting to get low oxygen levels. Okay, so this is what you focus on right here, the fever, the dry cough, and the shortness of breath, even though you can have any or none of these symptoms and still be positive. Okay? So ultimately, and Dr. Fauci, who's director of the Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, he said weeks ago, the test that everybody's focusing on is not very sensitive or specific. I was actually shocked that he said that. Okay, but he's right. The test that you have to get before you actually consider to have the condition, which hardly anybody's doing the test, right? So who knows how many cases there are right now? Nobody's getting a test, right? Or at least it's not being reported. And so but even if you get the test, it's very poor test. It's not like you got the test and, oh, you're negative. Well, that doesn't mean you're negative. It just means the test said you're negative. Or even if you're positive, it doesn't even really mean you're positive. It just means you may be positive. So we got to have better tests come up. We have to have better tests, and that's one reason that we're losing the war on this. Okay, so the bottom line, and Dr. Lowe mentioned understanding. We need to come up with a true understanding of what this is all about. It says the key to good decision making in terms of what we do next is not knowledge, it is understanding. We are swimming in the former, and we are desperately lacking in the latter. If you've read Malcolm Gladwell, you know that he's a very insightful man, and this is a statement that's for our time right now. We need to have understanding of what's going on so that we can move forward. Oh, by the way, this was in a YouTube segment that was entitled, Why 98% Aren't Successful. Okay, read between the lines on that one. Okay, so let me quickly read to you. We're now jumping into what I consider appropriate mitigation phase. In other words, what do we do about this? How do I prepare? How do I get my family ready to deal with this? And the beginning of understanding comes from recognizing who were successful in appropriately mitigating the Spanish flu in 1918. So let me read to you. 10 years ago, I was doing a talk by the same title, the first part of this, How to Optimize Your Immune System. And at the end of my talk, a gentleman came up to me and says, are you aware of the story of the Norwegian-Danish seminary? This was a Seventh-day Adventist Norwegian-Danish seminary west of Minneapolis, Minnesota. They had about 180 students and faculty in this huge Victorian-style school, most under one roof. And 90 of them came down with the Spanish flu. Are you aware of that story? So I've never even heard of it. So he told me the story and promised to me he would send me the document of the story. And I thought there was about a 10% chance that he would actually do it, but he did. He sent it to me, and here it is. Okay, and so this is a reprint from a newspaper into the Northern Union Reaper, which was a Christian newsletter put out by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Okay, but it actually is reprinting the actual article that was written by the editor of the Hutchinson Leader on December 13, I believe, 1918. It could have been 1919, but I believe it was 1918. The Spanish flu actually had 3 major waves to it, which is another deadly part of what may be going to happen with with the COVID-19 is that the first phase is not as bad, even though I don't know how you could say it's not that bad, but the second phase was just devastating compared to the first. You can actually get sick with it, get better for months, get sick again, and it kills you. There is actually a documented information and published relative to SARS and MERS that you can develop antibody-dependent viral entry into the cells. So just having some antibodies to that virus actually can make you more likely to get sick. It's a second portal through which the virus can get into the cell and infect your body. So, in other words, if you see somebody that gets sick and then gets better, make sure that you have them aware that this isn't necessarily over. And that's why what I'm going to read to you next is so critical. Because how long you take care of your health and you protect yourself from additional stressors once infected determines whether or not you get seriously ill, you survive, or whether you get sick again. So this document is called Seminary Clenches the Flu. Let me read it to you real quick. On the authority of Dr. Fred Shepard, health officer of Hutchinson City, again, west of Minneapolis, it may be stated that no public institution in the state of Minnesota has up to date made a record in handling influenza, the worldwide epidemic that has swept millions into their graves. Like that, to credit of the Hutchinson Seventh-day Adventist Seminary. The seminary, with 120 of its 180 students and teachers housed under one roof. Take a look at where they stayed. Now, if I had been told that we're on the verge of a respiratory viral pandemic, I would not want my son or daughter to reside in this building, right? I mean, that doesn't take too many brains to figure out, because you can just see. I mean, that's like a small cruise ship, right? I mean, you could just see the virus just flying through this room to room to room to room. Okay, so this is the actual picture of the main school building. That was a postcard a few years prior to the Spanish flu pandemic. So the seminary, with 120 of its 180 students and teachers housed under one roof, was invaded by the malady, the Spanish flu, 3 weeks ago. Symptoms of the malady developed in some 90 of these, and under the direction of Dr. Larson, a graduate physician and member of the seminary faculty, every person showing indication of sickness. Okay, so that's a key principle there. They didn't wait to get authentication of what the virus was. Of course, they didn't even have that option back then. But they immediately acted. So don't you wait until you get confirmation that you're testing positive on a test that's not even that good in the first place. If you have symptoms, start doing these natural remedies immediately. So every person showing indication of sickness was at once put to bed with a trained nurse taking temperatures and watching for symptoms of the epidemic. Of those symptoms developed, the patient was required to remain, if they developed, the patient was required to stay in bed. Okay? There were no drugs to be given. With complete rest and quiet went a careful regulated diet, fomentations, that's hot-cold fomentations or hot-cold hydrotherapy, hot-cold treatments, which you can do with towels that are hot or cold, back and forth. We'll go over that in a little bit. But you can also just take a hot shower and put, if you're not super sick, you're just feeling you're coming down, you can just get in the shower. 3 minutes hot as you can take it. Be careful. Don't do something stupid. Take it as hot as you can take it. And then after 3 minutes, go all the way cold. Now, in California, all the way cold. It's not like Michigan cold. It's not like Canada cold. It's not like Minneapolis, Minnesota cold. Okay, but I've lived in those places, and I know what that cold really is. But either way, it's actually relieving from going from very hot to very cold, and it's that contrast temperature, the degree of contrast stimulates your immune system, literally activates what we call spontaneous blastogenesis of the plasma cells, the B cells of the lymphatic system that are actually designed to make antibodies. And the hot-cold contrast spreads the immune cells all around to activate them against the virus. Then they go back, when they get massaged back and forth between the hot and cold, they go back to the immune centers all throughout the body and essentially mobilize 100% of the immune system to create antibodies that are specifically targeted to the virus or the pathogen in question. There's no medicine that comes close to that. That's what we call targeted chemotherapy that the body does on its own. And hydrotherapy enhances that dramatically. And so that's why from a therapeutic standpoint, that would be one of the things that you need to learn. You can go to YouTube and type in hot, cold fomentations, hydrotherapy treatments for colds and flus, and you can learn how to do that. There's various ways to do that. That's critical to help people. And you can do it yourself if you're feeling good enough. Fomentations were applied to the throat, to the chest, and to the abdomen. This treatment, in almost every case, reduced the temperatures of the patient, and in a day or so, they were apparently well. Now, this is an important part of the discussion about mitigation, about how we personally, in our family, can do something that actually works, that has been shown to work. Okay, that's been documented to work in a very serious pandemic that killed up to 100 million people worldwide. That people perish for a lack of knowledge. You've heard that? Okay, and even more so because of a lack of understanding. So the key here is that if they did this, in almost every case, reduced the temperature, and the patients were apparently well. But then they were told, you got to stay in bed for at least 2 more days. Talk about challenging, right? How do you get somebody who feels good finally after being sick for a couple days or a week, okay? And now they want to get back to their lives and catch up with all the things they've missed in school and work and, all the stresses that have built up during our time of sickness. Well, that is exactly would be the best way to get sick again and then get really sick and possibly die. Don't do it. Stay in bed. That's probably the most important strategy on top of proper hydration, proper diet, and fresh air and hydrotherapy. So, but that did not end the matter with them. The next danger was of relapse. To guard against this, every patient was required to remain in bed from 2 to 5 days after apparent full recovery, according to the state of their flu affliction. In other words, if there was even a little sign of a problem, Nurse Ratched made sure you were in bed. Okay, if you catch the joke there, right? So in this case, you want to have Nurse Ratched working for you, because otherwise you could die, literally, or reinfect somebody else, because you are still infectious. According to the reports, there is a high likelihood that people are still infectious after they get better, which is highly unusual for respiratory viruses. Okay? The asymptomatic period is infectious, which is unusual, and the after the symptoms are gone, you're also potentially still infectious. Okay, so as a result of this system of handling a disease, that is scoring thousands of victims every day. There has not been one case that could have been called serious or a single death in the seminary, although there were more than 90 persons affected. If you look at I actually have 8 books on the Spanish flu. I've been trying to catch up on any insight that we can get from the Spanish flu 100 years ago. And the bottom line here is that between 10 and 20% of those who were seriously infected died. So you could have expected 10 or 20 of these students and faculty to have died during that phase of the epidemic, but none of them even got seriously ill. Okay, it's because of what they did. It wasn't luck. Okay, it wasn't God just saying you're not going to get sick. It was people using God's methods of natural treatment to mitigate a disease that otherwise would kill, irrespective of faith. And so, the record is remarkable. And it makes the ordinary method of dealing with flu appear irrational. Direct quote from the document, the editor from the Hutchinson Leader near Minneapolis, Minnesota. I thought it was really worthwhile actually sharing that with you because this is so critical. Though that's the core. If you have to go home right now, you got the core. Okay? What did we learn from that? The number one, they immediately went to bed rest. Immediately. And they stayed at bed rest until there was no sign of any symptoms for at least 2 days, sometimes 5 days. It's tough to do, but that was a huge piece of why that was so successful. I believe that can be just as successful today. If the data is correct, and we believe it is, that 80% of us who get infected, even with this very virulent and deadly COVID-19 virus, if 80% of us can just go through it with just mild symptoms, then that 20% that gets seriously ill, that represents up to worldwide up to 50 or 100 million people that will die from this, okay? That could be decreased dramatically by just following that first principle. Okay. Number two is that they immediately were introduced. Hydration is key. You got to drink water. Okay. You got to drink plenty of water to stay hydrated. Number three, you got to be on the right diet. You know, when we feel bad, when we are when we feel dis-ease, okay, you get it? When we feel dis-ease, we're uneasy. What's one of the things we like to do? We start searching for something to make us feel better. And what is that? It's all the things that are going to depress your immune system. If I could just have a Sprite right now, that would just make my day. Well, that's guaranteed to depress your immune system. If I could just have a piece of pie right now, or a cookie, or cookies and milk, or just something just to make me feel temporarily better, that's exactly what would depress your immune system right then. We know this. This is all well documented. And so the challenge is, it's like when we're literally possessed by this virus, that virus is making us feel bad because it wants to survive and replicate. And it's literally putting thoughts into our minds to do things, to eat things, and to act in certain ways that is actually really bad for our body. So we got to consider that. So make sure that you stay away from sugar. Okay? Sugar is just a death blow to our immune system, especially when it's struggling. This is critical. Do you want to know why a diabetic, when they get a viral infection, their blood sugars go through the roof? Right? It's not because, and even if they're not eating anything, blood sugars go through the roof. Okay, so the last thing you need, okay, as a pre-diabetic, in other words, the vast majority of the population, the last thing we need is more sugar to increase the blood sugars further because they're going to be high already. Okay, so the diet is critical there. And a big part of what the seminary did, it wasn't in the article, but you got to believe that they were praying, they were trusting in God, and they were using that as a major stress management technique. Critical, okay? Active stress, not passive stress. Holding on to the things we believe to be true and feeling good about that, feeling that we dramatically are increasing our chance of not succumbing to this dreaded virus. So those are, and then the hydrotherapy. So those are the core natural remedies. Now let me jump through some other things real quickly. It was Winston Churchill who said, "Men stumble over the truth from time to time." You feel like you're stumbling over a little truth tonight? Okay. But most pick themselves up and hurry off as if nothing happened. I hope that tonight you don't do that. You go like, "Wow, that was kind of like a little bit out there, wasn't it? That was a little bit inappropriate, right? Whatever your thoughts are, I'm feeling the same thing, right? But I just feel like I got to say this because this is fact. This is truth. It's coming. And I hope I'm wrong, okay? But it's coming. And everybody that I trust, that I've been reading and listening to and watching on their presentations, are giving us the clues, and they've been giving us the clues for at least 3 weeks, but very few of us are listening. Okay, so we all know the principles of synergy. Some of the top professors around the world are saying, we're not going to beat this with one approach. I just shared with you a strategy that was multifactorial. They had multiple layers to it, and every piece of this was necessary. We could argue that no one piece by itself was adequate. Did you get that? As much as I emphasized the rest and the sleep and the diet and the hydration, no one of those, and probably no 2 of those, and probably no 3 of those together are going to be adequate to get everybody through, to get especially those who are prone to get sick, seriously ill. We need to hit this with all barrels, okay, if we're going to be successful. And that's the principle of synergy. Doing things together multiplies the possibility of success. So number 1, think good thoughts. This is the principle, the main stress management principle. I'm going to be addressing this tomorrow morning in our presentation in much more detail. Being a first-class foodie. Bottom line there is, if there was ever a time to focus on first-class foods or green light foods, it's now. And if you want to learn how to do that most effectively, talk to Dr. Lowe and his staff about the Diabetes Undone program that's going to start. You don't have to have diabetes to join the program. This is really for everybody who wants to be healthy. The bottom line is recognizing that the colors in the foods are the very pigments that actually turn on genes for the better, that turn off the bad genes. In fact, what I have been emphasizing with every patient that I see for years now is what I call the 3-cube diet. You're going to learn more about this aspect of the diet in the Diabetes Undone program. But a 3-cube diet, as I call it, is 3 full cups of green leafy vegetables every day. And in addition to that, not instead of that or as an option, but in addition to that, 3 cups of colorful vegetables and fruits that have deep colors through and through. Apples are okay, but that actually don't count on this list. On this particular, I love apples. I eat apples almost every day, but they're not colorful through and through. They just got a colorful outside, which is good for you. The inside is just regular fruit. The real therapeutic fruits are the blueberries and the boysenberries and fruits that have deep colors inside the meat itself. So 3 cups of that every day, and then 3 servings of sulfur-rich vegetables like the cabbage, the onions, the mushrooms, etc. And there's whole lists of this. You can just look it up. Give me a list of sulfur-containing fruits and vegetables. Boom. You can look this up on yourself, on the internet easily. That is the first step. So let me give you one major tip. What I have found in my own experience and in the experience of many of my patients is that breakfast is one of the worst meals of the day for most people because of what we choose to eat, especially as it relates to diabetes or pre-diabetes or insulin resistance. And one of the reasons for that is that most of us Americans, at least, don't even consider eating veggies for breakfast. Okay? But let me suggest to you that my favorite breakfast food is stir-fried vegetables. And stir-fry without any oil. You don't have to use any oil. You just stir. Basically, I chop this up right here. Chop up purple cabbage, onions and mushrooms. Okay? Put them in a skillet. Maybe add a little water initially. And stir-fry that for a few minutes until it starts to get a little brown. And then then we add the baby spinach. And you know, I used to always let my wife do this, and she still does it most of the time, but I actually enjoy helping her with this now because it's so good. And so we'll even chop up some Brussels sprouts really finely. It's so good. I just would have never believed that 20 years ago. Okay, it's just my favorite part of breakfast. You can still have other food, but you start there. Why? Because if you don't have that for breakfast, you're not going to be getting enough of these foods. Just listen to Dr. Joel Furman. He'll tell you. You got to have a lot of veggies. If you don't, even if you're eating all, quote, healthy food, you're not going to be as healthy. Okay, so that's your tip of the day. Just like Dr. Terry Walls, who 30 years ago cured herself of progressive MS, which is unheard of. And now she teaches doctors how to do the same. I've talked to her. She's brilliant. She says with regards to the diet, 100 days, 100%. You want to know how to do that? Join the Diabetes Undone program because that's what it's all about, how to help you really engage in a way that it makes it fun, it makes it enjoyable, it makes it tasty, and of course healthy. Okay, so optimize digestion, exercise. Exercise is so critical. Let me just say this about exercise. We need to be exercising daily in fresh air, preferably in sunlight. But we got to be really careful. Right now, we are in the exposure phase. So we're in the last week of February 2020. We're in the exposure phase of COVID-19. Okay, this is not before the exposure phase. We're in the exposure phase. Okay, basically authorities are waiting until this hits documented fourth-generation transmission. But they're really not documenting very much. So it's going to be a while before we know. It's going to be too late. So we're in the exposure phase, and we need to do something now to protect ourselves because we're probably going to be exposed. I'm expecting to be exposed by this. Okay? So what am I going to do about it? So exercising appropriately every day, but not hard, not excessively hard. The last thing you want to be doing right now is shooting for a personal best on a marathon. Why? 'Cause I actually did research on marathons 30 years ago with Dr. David Neiman, and it's documented if you try to do a personal best on a marathon or even any major race, you're going to depress your immune system for about a week. And that's all it takes is for an exposure. If you just happen to get exposed during that week, you're infected, no matter how otherwise healthy you are. So don't overdo exercise. That's my main thing. But don't underdo it either. You need to be exercising lightly to moderately after every meal to get your circulation going. If you want to learn why and how to do that effectively, talk to Dr. Lowe and you can join the Diabetes Undone program. That's what they do. Okay, so exercise appropriately. Optimize your weight. This is the time to do it. If you start doing the stir-fry veggie for breakfast, and you need to lose weight, you're going to lose weight. Okay, so that's the good news. Why? Because if you're overweight, you're more prone to the virus and other infections too. It's just documented. Okay, so which of the strategies is the most important? What would you be thinking based on what I've said so far? If I had to pick one, okay, remember I said that one's probably not going to cut it, but if you had to concentrate or focus on any one strategy and make sure that you do that on top of the other things, what would it be? Okay, so let's just spend a little bit of time. You got to get sound sleep. Okay, and we could spend hours talking just about this, By the way, tomorrow afternoon, after my 2 o'clock presentation, we're going to have time for Q&A. Okay, and I'm going to give a lot of time for question and answers so we can integrate all this information at the end, all right? So I'm just going to go through this real quickly. I've been actually learning from the world's experts on respiratory viral infections for the last 3 weeks. I've been doing a crash course. I've probably done 110 credits in 3 weeks. Literally, I've spent about 3 days, 3 hours a day listening, learning from the experts, learning from MedCram. I got this slide because of watching this video blog called MedCram. It's a pulmonologist, a sleep specialist who prepares medical students and residents for tests. And he has all kinds of video presentations on you name the topic. He's brilliant. I've studied under Dr. John Campbell, medical school professor at in the UK, who's been doing a blog for the last 3 weeks every day on the novel coronavirus and what it means. And so I've been able to pick the brains of multiple experts and get their various perspectives as I also learn on my own. And so this pulmonologist, the sleep specialist, gave 2 studies a couple days ago on his video blog. And basically the study was the effects of sleep deprivation on response to immunization. You know, if you ever choose to get immunized, make sure you're healthy, because if you're not healthy, it's not going to work very well, and if it has any potential negative side effects, they're going to be magnified. So at least be healthy before you do that, okay? And there's all kinds of studies documenting that, by the way. And so the key thing here, and that includes the right mental framework, just 7 minutes of negative thoughts, hostile thoughts, thinking about things that happened in the past that were harmful to you, right around the time of immunization can dramatically decrease the effectiveness of that immunization. Okay? So what you do on your personal life and your personal choices makes every difference, no matter what else you choose to do. So this study, this is directly from MedCram, but from the pulmonologist. So he basically shows here, and I know that you can't read this, but it's just to remind me to talk about this. He basically looked at 25 young, healthy men, average age 23. And he basically had a control group that got 8 hours of sleep every night. All of them had good sleep every night for many months. Okay, but half of them got randomized to having 6 nights of only 4 hours of sleep. On the 4th night, or on the 4th day, they were immunized. And basically, 7 days later, after they were able to sleep up to 12 hours every night, so they're making it up, right? They're getting healthier again. They're catching up. That's the rationalization we make. If we spend a couple nights without much sleep, we'll make it up over the weekend, or we'll make it up over next week. Doesn't happen. We don't make it up. Okay, and here's proof. On the 4th night of that decreased sleep, 4 hours a night instead of 7 to 8 hours, what happened? They got immunized. A week later, their antibody titers were only half of what the control group had. They are otherwise the same health, but their ability to mount an antibody response properly was dramatically lessened. Okay, so that just shows you. In other words, if you have even a couple nights of poor sleep, and then you get exposed sometime in the next 3 to 7 days with a virus, your chance of getting infected from that exposure just went way up, and your chance of that infection to create a more serious illness just went way up. So what we do matters dramatically in these cases. Now, none of this passive immunity concept is not adequate. We need to have active immunity based on our choices. Okay, now, here's another study, sleep habits and susceptibility to the common cold, the rhinovirus. Okay, so this was published in 2009 in the Archives of Internal Medicine. Again, one one of my favorite medical journals. I love the type of studies that they put into their journal, including this one. And basically, as MedCram on YouTube indicated, Dr. Cohen's work, they had 153 people between age 21 and 55. They looked at two things. They looked at the duration of sleep. Those who got less than 7 hours of sleep were 300% more likely to catch a cold when exposed. 300%, 3 times more, okay? Those who had less efficiency of sleep. In other words, they got 8 hours of sleep, but they weren't sleeping well. They were waking up, they were tossing and turning, they were not comfortable, so they weren't, for whatever reason, it was less efficient sleep. Guess how much more likely they were to get the common cold? 5 times more likely. In other words, if we have a problem with sleep, we are sitting ducks with viruses that are much more effective and much more virulent, much more deadly than the common cold or the common flu. Okay? So we got to fix this. I'm not saying it's easy. I can read your minds. I know half of you are saying, you have no idea the problems I have with sleep. Oh, yes, I do. I've been doing this for 30 years. I know. I've heard it all. I'm just saying you got to fix it. Because if you don't, you're going to be immunocompromised. Okay? So don't just wash your hands of the matter and go home and say there's really nothing that I can do, because that's not true. There's always something you can do. You just haven't talked to the right person yet. Okay? So figure it out. Make sure. Okay, so, all right. So we know that sleep deprivation dramatically impairs many genes in our body. In fact, it's said that poor sleep habits impair or decrease the efficiency of a full 1/3 of our entire genetic genome. Okay, that means over 7,000 genes in our body are not working properly just because we're not sleeping properly. Okay, so fix it. Stay hydrated. Stay hydrated. 3 most important times to drink water. What's the most important time? First thing in the morning. You got to. That's when you're the most dehydrated. That's when you're most likely to have a heart attack or a stroke. Hydrate. Okay, and so you should be getting anywhere from 16 to 20 ounces of water, preferably warm to extra warm, to just get it into your system quickly. Okay, and then what's the second and third most important time to drink water? Mid-morning and mid-afternoon. Okay, so if you're not good at drinking water, set the alarm on your smartphone for mid-morning and mid-afternoon, and use a ringer that's like a waterfall or a dripping faucet. And that'll remind you, and that's really, really critical. So, and then soak up the sun. So we could literally talk for 1 to 2 hours just about the importance of sunlight. By the way, sunlight kills viruses very quickly. Okay, so you need to get outside in the sunlight and kill them little guys. Just kill those viruses on your body. Okay, sunlight also generates vitamin D when you're collecting it in the middle of the day when the sun is high in the sky. You can generate vitamin D, which then kills viruses inside your body. Okay, powerfully. And so again, we could go on and on how vitamin D works. Here's the bottom line. If your vitamin D is low, you're dramatically at higher risk in this pandemic. Okay? So fix it. Okay, get tested. Okay, why get tested? Because most of you don't believe what I just said. That's why you get tested. You'll go home and say, I'm not low. Maybe other people are low, but I'm not low. I used to think that too until I tested myself about 25 years ago, and I was shocked that my vitamin D was low, even though I was in Guam and I spent time in the sun every afternoon. Okay? So don't believe this idea that if you just spend a little bit of time in the sun 3 or 4 times a week that you have all the vitamin D you need. It's just simply not true. How do I know? I tested every patient for the last 25 years on vitamin D. It doesn't work. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying sun is good for you. It's just not adequate, right? It's not enough. You need to take vitamin D. And how do you know how much to take? Test it before and after. That's the only way you're going to know. Test it in the fall, or right now if you haven't tested it before, and then 3 or 4 months later, or in the spring. And then after a couple tests, you'll start understanding what your body needs. But if when in doubt, like right now, if somebody's not planning to test themselves for a while, you're in the exposure phase right now. You need to start taking some vitamin D. Okay? And on average, that's 5,000 a day. Many people have challenged me on that, okay? But, because you can have an epidemiologic answer of what is adequate, which has nothing to do with clinical adequacy, by the way. Okay? You pardon me?
They say it's 1,000.
Yeah, 1,000. Not going to work. I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's not. It's kind of like having a bacterial infection, and somebody saying, well, normally we would give this at a certain dose for 14 days, let's say. But you know what? You're just going to do about a third of the dose, and you're only going to do it for 3 days. Is that going to work? The antibiotic is the right antibiotic, but it's not going to work. You're just not giving enough of it and not for long enough. So it's the same thing with vitamin D. You got to give enough, and the bottom line is that you need on average 5,000 a day. And in my patients, if you're my patient, I would go right now 10,000 a day. But get tested so you know. There's maybe 1% or less of the population that doesn't need that much vitamin D, but most of us do, right? So by testing, we can determine what is necessary. All right. So bottom line is, if you live above the 37th degree parallel, you've got a 5-month vitamin D winner. You could be out in the sun all day long and get 0 vitamin D or negligible amounts of vitamin D. So even near San Diego, where I live, go out in the wintertime right now in February, and you have to be pretty close to noon for that sun to be above 45 degrees in the sky. So the vitamin D generating power of sunlight in Southern California is only a couple hours long in the middle of the day. Everything before that and after is good sunlight, but it's not vitamin D generating. Okay, so that's why we call it the sun shadow standard. If your shadow is longer than you are tall, you're not making any vitamin D, bottom line. Okay, so take advantage of that. Studies have documented with the influenza virus, vitamin D helps your body kill it and prevent it in a dramatic way. Basically, African American women who were given vitamin D compared to a placebo, okay, were 1/3 of the risk of developing seasonal influenza. And that's with a low dose of vitamin D. Just think if they got enough of the vitamin D, it would have been far less than that. Okay, so bottom line, I mentioned earlier that individuals with asthma or lung challenges are much more prone to viral infections. And here's a study with kids with asthma, even a little bit of vitamin D, okay, 1,200 units of vitamin D taken daily during the at-risk months of between December and March, during flu season, they were much less likely. They were only 11% of them who were taking vitamin D developed the flu, compared to 19% of those not taking the vitamin D. So, but if they had a previous history of asthma, those taking the vitamin D only had 1/5 of the risk of coming down with the flu compared to those not taking the vitamin D. So you can imagine, I hope somebody does research on this new COVID-19 and how vitamin D influences susceptibility, severe infection rates, death rate, and reoccurrence rate. Okay, so if I were a betting man, I'd put a lot of money that this would be a big factor. Okay, and so but I'm not a betting man, and so I just do it. You know, I just take advantage of it. There's no downside to do this. It's all upside. Okay, even with tuberculosis, vitamin D dramatically helps. Known medical therapies work much better. Let me just tell you one of the key remedies here. And this was actually published in a medical journal some years ago, because of the work of Dr. John Cannell, who is actually a psychiatrist, who learned that his psychiatry patients did much better in the hospital if they were taking vitamin D. They were much less likely to get the flu that everybody else in the hospital was getting, but everybody in the psychiatry ward was fine. Why? Because he was the psychiatrist in charge of that floor, and he made sure they got vitamin D. So pick the right doctor, I guess. You got to pick the right doctor because that can make a big difference. Anyways, the recommended strategy for therapeutically treating a cold or a flu or any respiratory viral illness, or really any infectious illness at all, would be that to temporarily take the equivalent of 1,000 units of vitamin D per pound body weight per day for 3 days. Now, that's actually a lot of vitamin D. Now, if you do the math, if you weigh 200 pounds and you follow that formula, you're taking 300 or 200,000 units of vitamin D a day for 3 days. That was the published report. I don't find that that's necessary. So I actually toned that down to about 50,000 units a day for adults and gradually decrease that by body weight for children. Okay, but roughly 50,000 units a day, or even once or twice a day, depending on your symptoms. So if you start to feel sick, you can do 50,000. Boom, right the first day. Okay, and then if you're still getting sicker that day, later on that day, do another 50,000. Okay, and by the way, 50,000 is the normal prescription per week if you're vitamin D deficient. So if you go to the VA and you test your vitamin D and you're deficient, they'll give you 50,000 once a week for like 8 weeks. That's the official recommendation. We're talking about daily or twice a day. It's not too much. Trust me, I've been doing this a long time, and it actually powerfully works. I can tell you many stories of how well that's worked. But and so that's one of the strategies that can be powerful all by itself, but you never rely on one strategy alone. Never. Because, well, you don't have to. Nobody's saying you got to choose between these strategies. So let's keep looking at some of the other ones. The principles here are always first-line therapy. Always natural therapies first. Diet, sleep, rest, trust in God, forgiveness, all those things. Then you got the nutritional or supplemental simple remedies that you augment to the natural remedies according to your need, according to what the research suggests is prudent, and you optimize that. And then you do the third-line therapies, which is using the appropriate pharmaceuticals to try to make up the difference. That's the step care approach that is, in my mind, the most prudent way to do things. And sometimes you got to do all three at once, okay? Because depending on the severity of the concern. Make sure you pay attention to the hidden culprits, which can be, is your house moldy? Do you have toxins in your environment? Okay, you can't be blaming that God is not taking care of you if you're living in a moldy house or you have a toxic environment. Right? I mean, you got to use your head. You got to pay attention to environmental factors. So pay attention to this. This is key. It's a key part of my practice now with patients. All right. Reach out for help. You know, don't try to do it by yourself, but there's a lot of help available from places like this organization with the Diabetes Undone program. Okay. So another quick thing is there was a study a few years ago showing that if you ran around with cold feet all the time, have you heard this wives' tale this folk medicine approach just to keep your feet warm. I actually did this talk just a few weeks ago, and somebody challenged me on YouTube. They say, hey, well, that great talk, Dr. Weiss, but that whole thing about cold feet, that's just a myth. I'm going like, what? Didn't I actually present a peer-reviewed study that documented this is not a myth, right? This is real. This is real. Now, I'm not saying that people can't run around barefoot once in a while. That actually might be good for people. I'm saying that if you have a weak immune system and you're prone to catching an illness, you don't want to get your body cold. You don't want to get your body, and if you get wet, if you get damp, you got to dry off. You can't walk around the rest of the day damp, because then you probably will get a sickness. That's depressive on the immune system. On the other hand, if you do hydrotherapy, hot, then super cold, that boosts your immunity. So cold therapy works under the right circumstances, but it can work against you under other circumstances. So just be wise in your approach to this. So bottom line is that those who had cold feet, there was a whole protocol that they went through. Those who had extended cold feet for a period of 30 minutes or more, where they were like in cold water, they were 3 times more likely to get the common cold. Okay? So pay attention. So if you're feeling a little chilled, you know why you feel chilled, even if you're running a little bit of a fever? Because the body is trying to make you warmer, force you to bundle up and get the temperature up. Why? Because a higher temperature is good for your immune system. Don't treat mild to moderate fevers. You're basically impairing the effect of your immune system when you do that. Let it burn. Now, if you're running 105, then yeah, you got to bring it down, right? But I've heard arguments that anything under 104 you don't treat unless you're feeling really horrible and you can't sleep. Okay, but the more you treat mild fevers, the longer you're going to be sick. Okay, you wanna have a mobilized immune system, which requires a higher temperature to be more efficient. So bundle up and drink lots of water. Don't overeat. Do things that make sense, right? All right. Now, the last part of this is forgiveness. And I'll talk a little bit about this tomorrow. But if we're stressed out all the time, okay, and if we have hostility in our hearts, okay, if we're blaming the authorities for this, if we're blaming each other for that, if everything is negative, that's going to depress your immune system pretty much more than almost anything. So don't do it. Don't go there. Okay? We need to find positive thinking. Okay? And so forgiveness is the only prescription in the entire universe that is powerful enough to unlock the chemical bonds of hostility, resentment, and bitterness. It is the medicine of greatest importance. There's actually a bunch of research documenting this. Hundreds of studies documenting this, okay? And this is just the way I present it to the public. Okay. So a couple of quick things. And so we're going to go through this real quick. And I'm looking at some simple remedies now. Okay, so we've talked about the core natural remedies. We've talked about the core, what we call the 8 laws of health, right? The 8 natural remedies. Okay, now I'm going to go through fairly quickly some simple remedies that would be, based on my 30 years of clinical experience, worthwhile. Okay, and there's plenty of people that you and I would both respect that would disagree with me in a lot of these things, but that doesn't mean they're right. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean I'm right either, by the way, so check it out. But this is something that I've studied in depth over the last 30 years, and this is what I feel comfortable recommending to you. So I recently took a continuing medical education course by Dr. William Walsh, who goes all around the world teaching doctors about the power of nutrients. And he actually taught me to think differently about some things, because I always used to feel that we always change the macro diet first, and then we get into the individual nutrient power. That makes sense to me. And in many respects, that's still true. But in many medical conditions, that is not true. Because in many medical conditions, they are actually driven by imbalances, like a copper-zinc imbalance. And until you fix that imbalance, no amount of a plant-based diet is going to fix that. At least not right away. Okay, so if you want to get clinical benefit more quickly, you fix these initial imbalances. And how do you know whether to fix it or not? How do you know? You got to test, yeah. All right, it's kind of like, it's like, did you see I saw this past week says you can't have an epidemic if you're not doing testing. That's kind of where we're at right now. Okay, so you can't know how to treat nutrients if you don't even know the first thing about testing nutrients. Right? I mean, these tests are readily available at any lab. Okay, so great stuff from Dr. William Walsh. So the first thing to consider, zinc lozenges. During the wintertime, I may actually carry a couple of the zinc lozenges. They only have 10 milligrams of zinc in them. And this works better than taking regular zinc. Why? Because it's releasing the zinc ions, okay, into the throat area where the viruses are, and it's killing the viruses. Okay? So that's just, there's actually good studies documenting that. And we could spend an hour showing you those studies, and we won't. Just look it up if you don't believe me. Okay? In fact, look it up even if you do believe me. The studies are good there. So zinc is one of the things that is useful in treating especially viral related. One of the other reasons it's good is because more than not, many of us actually have a copper excess and a zinc deficiency. When we're low in zinc, the body absorbs more copper and other toxins with it, creating cardiovascular risk, creating immunocompromise, creating neurologic problems, and even behavioral problems. So fixing copper-zinc ratio is critical in many, many conditions. Okay, so here's an actual study that actually that's a veterinarian journal put out in 2018 on the effectiveness of oral iodine in the form of sodium iodide to prevent bovine respiratory disease complex. You know that studies have shown that coronavirus transmission directly from bats to humans has been already documented. I didn't know that until this morning. It's been documented for years. Okay, in other words, it doesn't have to go through a pig or whatever. It can just go direct. Okay, but it never went epidemic because it was in rural areas. It wasn't in the cities. Okay, so the bottom line is that this study actually said if you get animals close together and in filthy scenarios, you're going to get a very strong likelihood of viruses jumping from whatever animal to a human. In other words, the bat coronavirus can infect a human directly and create antibodies. That's been documented. This is way before COVID-19. Okay, so this is becoming a bigger issue as how we relate to the animals around us, and another reason not to eat animals, because MERS, the most deadly virus out there that killed between 35 and 40% of those infected, was actually people were infected by eating camel meat directly. Okay, so in other words, you can get many zoonotic diseases by eating animal flesh. Okay, so be aware. That's one of many reasons why we strongly recommend a plant-based diet. There's all kinds of studies showing that iodine is one of the best antivirals ever. Let me just summarize this real quick. I've actually spent hundreds of hours in the last couple months studying iodine. You know that after the Spanish flu epidemic or pandemic, the government of the United States and other governments put millions of dollars in trying to figure out how do we prevent this from ever happening again. And you know what? The number one strategy that came up in terms of a mitigation strategy, iodine. Iodine. Okay, so iodine is one of the is the best antiviral out there, from everything that I've read on this. It's the best antiviral, and it kills all viruses. It's documented to kill SARS, MERS, the Mediterranean type of coronavirus that was so deadly. It kills bacteria, fungi, parasites. It kills everything that's not supposed to be in your body. So why haven't we used it more? Well, I'll let you kind of ponder that. Okay, it's very cheap. It's readily available, and there's a whole protocol on how to use this. Okay, I was going to bring up my little bottle, but it's in the car. Well, you'll see this here shortly. Okay, so bottle here it is. So here's actually my bottle of dilute liquid iodine. It's only 150 micrograms per drop. It's very dilute, but you can have 1 to 1,000 dilution of iodine, and it's still powerfully antiviral. So this is very antiviral already, even though it's dilute, much more dilute than Lugol's or the more concentrated forms of iodine. Okay, so but what's nice about this is you can just go on Amazon and order a little snoot cap, okay, a little snoot bottle, which is this pharmaceutical grade spritzer, and you can spray low grade or low dose iodine directly into your sinuses multiple times a day. Something I've been doing about 3 or 4 times a day for the last 3 weeks. This low dose. I forget the physician's name, but he actually won the Nobel Prize for Medicine in, I believe, 1950s. He and another colleague in 1945 did research on a lethal viral mist in a container that had mice, and that lethal viral mist, as you would expect because it's lethal, killed all the mice. But if they rubbed 5% iodine on their mouse nostrils, okay, they didn't die. I wouldn't have guessed that, but this is obviously not a slouch. This is a Nobel laureate from times past, and a brilliant scientist. And so, in other words, we need to kind of act on these strategies. They're simple strategies. The recommendation, 25 years of research said, if you're doing consultations with people in the hospital that have been exposed to this virus or who have the virus, you should have a fine iodine mist spraying in the room. Now, one challenge with that is that less than 1% of the population are actually allergic to iodine. So that's one of the challenges. You're going to have a separate ward for those who are sensitive to iodine, but possibly 9% of individuals would actually benefit from the iodine, okay, and would save all. The virus, we know that the virus is in droplets, right, 3 to 6 feet, but more and more now we're realizing that it's also aerosolized like the common flu, which means it can hang in the air and go all the way across the room and still be in the air, and then we breathe it in. So if I'm infected, you could be infected right now. You could be exposed, rather, and potentially infected if it takes hold. If your immune system isn't able to right away get rid of it, you could be infected too, even though I'm more than 10 feet away from you. Do you think there's some implications to that? Okay, so this idea, as long as you don't touch somebody, you're going to be okay. How well did that work on the cruise ship? Right? Okay, I think prudence suggests that until proven otherwise, this is highly transmissible through the air. Okay, so we need to consider that. All right, so liquid iodine. Then there's see what kills people when they get seriously ill. Why do they die? Why does at least 1% of those infected die? Which could amount to be, well, in some low estimates, according to Harvard and Hong Kong University, 50 million people worldwide. Okay, that's 1% of infected. Okay, so it could be 2%, it could be 4%. We don't know yet. Okay, so why do they die? Well, they die from pneumonia or sepsis. Okay, and so there's some actually very exciting research about sepsis is the number one costly intervention in hospitals nationally. Number one cost in hospitals, sepsis. And 20% of people who die worldwide die from sepsis. Should we have some good strategies for sepsis? Well, so real quick, let me just jump to it. Dr. Paul Merrick, some years ago, came up with what's called a HAT protocol. H for hydrocortisone, an anti-inflammatory that blocks cytokine storm and the real damage to the body and the in-organ damage problem. Ascorbic acid, yes, vitamin C. Okay, of course, he was ridiculed for this, just like pretty much anybody who ever talks about vitamin C gets ridiculed, even though there's tons of research on this. Lots of it, okay, including Dr. Merrick's research, and then thiamine. So a B vitamin, vitamin C, and hydrocortisone in an IV every 6 to 12 hours powerfully lowers the death rate due to sepsis. Okay? And the studies who suggest that it's not as powerful as it needs to be, in my opinion, it's because they're not using enough of this. Certainly not compared to what all the experts from years ago used. They're using only 1,500 milligrams of vitamin C per infusion. That's nothing compared to the 60 to 100 grams of infusion that many doctors use to treat any viral illness in the past. Okay, and this is all written up. Okay, so I'm not talking about things that I do. I'm talking about things that have been reported for decades and decades. Okay, so there's a lot of studies on this. Bottom line, why do humans need to supplement vitamin C? First of all, the most important way to get your vitamin C is to eat the 3-cube diet. Eat a plant-based diet, and if you're eating the right plants in the right amounts, not just because you're plant-based, but you're eating enough of the deep, colorful fruits and vegetables, you're going to get at least 1,500 milligrams of vitamin C a day, just from plants. So that's the first step and the most important step. You get the vitamin C in its natural, with all the other natural components. Okay, but if you're facing a viral issue, one of the things that kills people from respiratory infections and other infections is they develop scurvy. Yes, this is documented. They develop scurvy, which tells you what? The body's using up the vitamin C for a reason. It's trying to use the vitamin C to protect itself. So what should we do as medical professionals? We should optimize the very nutrient that the body is using for that purpose. Right? And so why is that important? Well, you look at a standard 70-kilogram animal. 99% of animals around the world make all the vitamin C they need, and guess from what substance? Glucose. They have an enzyme. The vast majority of animals, of species around the world, have enzymes that will take glucose and convert it to vitamin C. You and I don't have that enzyme. Okay? Apes don't have it. Fruit bats don't have it. Guinea pigs don't have it. There's just a few species that don't have it. Everybody else almost has it. Okay? So if just on a normal, a good day, a healthy 70-kilogram animal makes between 2,000 and 4,000 milligrams of vitamin C just because they're alive. Okay? I would argue, as Dr. Linus Pauling, winner of 2 different Nobel Prizes, the one for chemistry and the one for peace, he said that we all need to supplement vitamin C as if to the same level that we would get if we had the enzyme that everybody else has, all other animals have. Okay, just a thought. Okay, so that's part of the justification for this. Okay, so the bottom line is we know that 100% of septic patients have a vitamin C level that's under 23 micromoles per liter, okay, and 40% are frankly in the scurvy range. Okay? So that should mean something to us. Optimize vitamin C orally, and if you have a real serious illness, it'd be nice to work with a health professional that is willing to infuse vitamin C. It's not hard, it's super cheap, and it could save your life. Okay, so so plenty of oral vitamin C. Biocidin is I have this little handout that I give to my patients that says, okay, in the case of a growing viral infection in your body where you're starting to feel it, what do? Here are the natural remedies, and here are the simple remedies. Biocidin is a product that was actually referred to me by a physician who specializes in infectious disease, and this is a throat spray formula. It's pretty potent, but it'll knock out a virus in your throat in a couple hours if you catch it in time. Okay, so it's worth having that in your emergency medicine cabinet. Okay, so probiotics help optimize the microbiome. Okay, but the most important is to eat the plant-based diet to optimize your microbiome. Prebiotics, I've been using this in my practice for 25 or more years. It's a prebiotic, it's a fiber, it's a glycoprotein that dramatically enhances the immune system. Okay, so IAG, arabinogalactan, and that is food for the probiotics so that your gut-associated lymphatics are optimized and work in your favor. And then aloe vera extract powder has similar prebiotic qualities. So that's just that's kind of a short overview of some of the things that can benefit from a simple remedy standpoint. So Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "An ounce of action is worth a ton of theory." So it's time to stop looking for more theories and contemplating theories and come up with our plan of action. And I hope I've given you some thoughts on what you can do personally to take on this challenge that the WHO and that the CDC and that professors around the world have been shouting from the rooftops for over 3 weeks already, is that we must be prepared, not only on a public community level, but we must be prepared at a personal family unit level. There's things that we can do that can be active stress, that actually mobilize your immune system effectively. So with that, I will bid you good night so that you get a good night's sleep, and so that tomorrow morning when we talk next, you'll have a robust immune system. Okay, so let's bow our heads for a word of prayer before we dismiss. Father, we have all been challenged to consider some very sobering statistics and statements by world medical authorities. And so, Lord, I just pray that this information has not fallen on deaf ears, whether it be in this room or whether somebody listening on the live streaming or on the recorded program, that they would treat this as a call to action, that they would develop this information and integrate it with other information that they have to come up with a plan that can be the first step in managing their own stress, the first step in developing a system that can powerfully limit the spread of this disease, that can powerfully limit the infectivity on a personal and family level of this disease, and even those of us who do get infected, that can powerfully limit the severity of the disease and the risk of death. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So, again, the main call to action is to take care of your health. If some of the things that I've shared with you are just like too complicated in your minds, focus on the things that aren't complicated, right? Make a plan regardless. Don't get confused by things that you don't understand. Focus on the obvious. So that's why I always say there's a lot of obvious things that we discussed here tonight. A lot of obvious things. Anybody would say that. At least do those things. With that, I bid you good night. We will be doing Q&A tomorrow afternoon. So if you have questions, don't come up to me tonight because I need to get to sleep too. Okay? Because if I don't get my sleep, I might be infectious tomorrow. Okay.